Imagine bringing the largest, most heavily armed military empire in modern history to its absolute knees
Right.
and doing it without firing a single bullet. Like, you don't build a covert army, you don't buy tanks,
Right.
you walk down to the beach and you make some salt.
I mean, it sounds like a fable when you frame it that way, right?
Yeah.
Almost absurd.
Totally.
But it happens to be one of the most effective, like brilliantly executed political strategies of the 20th century.
It really is. And, well, welcome to this deep dive, because today we are diving into the actual blueprints of how that happened. For you listening right now, I want you to mentally circle a very specific date on your calendar, October 2nd.
Yeah, that deed is key.
Because our deep dive today isn't just about a day, it's about this massive, almost magnetic convergence of history. We've got a stack of historical notes here, and we're looking at the intertwined lives of two colossal figures of Indian history who were unbelievably both born on this exact day.
Which is just a wild coincidence.
Right. One is globally iconic, a man saddled with like a dozen contradictory nicknames, Mahatma Gandhi. And the other is his crucial yet much quieter successor, Lal Bahadur Shastri.
It really is a remarkable synchronicity. I mean, two men born on the exact same day, decades apart, who essentially formed the 1-2 punch of a nation's birth, and it's really turbulent early survival.
Exactly. And our mission today is to extract the absolute aha moments from their timelines. Now, I want to assure you listening, we are not going to pelt you with a barrage of memorization.
No pop quizzes here.
Right. We aren't prepping you for a history exam. We're here to look under the hood, you know?
No.
You want to understand the psychological mechanics and the broader context of how these two iconic lives shaped an entire nation.
That is the perfect approach. We were looking for the why and the how rather than just the what.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting with the father of the nation. Because to understand how he developed the leverage to move an empire, we have to look at the pressure cooker that forged him.
Oh, absolutely. The early years are crucial.
So he was born Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi in Porbandar, Gujarat, on October 2nd, 1869. His father, Karamchand, was actually a regional chief minister, the Diwan of Rajkot. And his mother, Putlibai, instilled this like really deep traditionalism in him.
Yeah, a very structured, traditional upbringing.
Very. In fact, he was married to Kasturba when he was just 13 years old.
See, that detail always halts people in their tracks. 13 years old.
It's hard to wrap your head around today.
It is. It just highlights how steeped in traditional 19th century structures his early life was, you know. He would go on to have 4 biological sons, Harlal, Manelal, Ramdas, and Devdas. But what's fascinating is how his concept of family rapidly expanded.
Oh, right. You mean the fifth son.
Yes, a close associate, Jamnalal Bajaj, became so integrated into his life and philosophy that he was widely considered Gandhi's 5th son.
Wow.
Yeah, it was an early indicator that his worldview was destined to stretch far beyond just biological or regional boundaries.
But the real catalyst, the spark that sets everything ablaze, happens when he leaves that traditional structure. So he goes to England in 1888 to study law, becomes a barrister, returns in 1891, and then takes this trip to South Africa in 1893 to assist an Indian merchant named Abdullah Seth.
Right, which was supposed to be a short trip.
Exactly. He meant to go for a short legal stint, and he ends up staying for 21 years. Now, I look at this South African period not just as a detour, but as a profound crucible. It's like a protagonist's training ground, you know?
I love that analogy. It really was.
Right. It's like the exact right conditions of extreme systemic prejudice were required to force his highly educated legal mind to invent a totally new form of resistance.
A crucible is the right metaphor. What's fascinating here is that South Africa was essentially his laboratory.
A laboratory. Yeah.
He arrived as a young, English-educated lawyer expecting the rights of a British subject, and instead he was thrust into this brutal system of racism. But instead of just fighting individual legal cases, he started testing massive sociological theories. Like, he established the Phoenix Farm in Durban.
Right, the early communal living experiment.
Exactly. And our source notes it was established as a sort of laboratory for his ideas, with the source specifically dating its establishment context to around 1940 in retrospect. But it served as that early experimental space for communal living and self-reliance.
And self-reliance is the operative word there, isn't it? I mean, if you don't need the empire's goods or the empire's social structures to survive, the empire suddenly loses its leverage over you.
Precisely. That was the profound shift. He was figuring out how to untether a community from the system that oppressed them. And when he finally returns to India on January 9th, 1915, He is bringing that revolutionary operating system with him.
Which was a massive deal.
Huge. To give you a sense of how deeply that specific return impacted the nation, that date is now officially celebrated as Pravasi Paratia Divas. It's a tradition started in 2003, honoring the day their greatest expatriate finally came home to do his real work.
So he steps off the boat, carrying this newly forged philosophy. He's welcomed by his political guru, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, and he immediately starts applying these theories.
Hitting the ground running.
Totally. We see the first iterations in places like Champaran in 1917, where he's invited by Rajkumar Shukla to advocate for indigo farmers. And then we see his very first hunger strike in India during the Ahmedabad mill strike in 1918.
Right. Testing the tools of resistance.
But the real collision with the British Empire hits with the Rowlatt Act in 1919.
Oh yeah, a truly draconian piece of legislation. It was designed to completely stifle any rising tide of independence.
The historical translation of its ominous reputation is just chilling. It was known as the without appeal, without lawyer, without argument, black law. Bina appeal, bina vakil, bina dalil.
Just terrifying, legally speaking.
Right. The state could literally strip away all your legal rights without a shred of due process. Gandhi calls it a black law and organizes a massive nationwide strike, which of course sets the stage for the massive non-cooperation movement in 1920.
It was a direct escalation.
But here's where it gets really interesting, because here's where I have to push back a bit, as I think we sort of sanitize this history in hindsight.
Okay, how so?
Put yourself in that exact moment, right? You are facing an occupying empire that has just passed absolute brutal laws designed to crush dissent. They have the police, the prisons, the military. When facing a brutal, absolute law like the Rowlatt Act, literally designed to strip away all legal rights, how does something as simple as a 24-day walk to make salt or a hunger strike actually work as a weapon?
It seems impossible on paper.
Exactly. If you tell a military commander you're going to fight their guns by fasting, they would laugh you out of the room.
They would. It is deeply counterintuitive, which is exactly why it worked. To understand the mechanics of it, the why, we have to look at his primary weapon, ahimsa, or nonviolence, and his overarching strategy, satyagraha.
The pursuit of truth.
Right. Satyagraha roughly translates to holding firmly to the truth. Gandhi knew full well he couldn't outmuscle the British Empire. If you fight a violent empire with violence, you are playing their game on their turf. And, well, they have all the guns.
It's like a political martial art. You don't block the punch, you use the opponent's overwhelming momentum against them.
That is an excellent way to frame it. Ahimsa was political judo. If you simply refuse to comply with an unjust law and you absorb the state's violence without striking back, you force a psychological crisis.
You break their narrative.
Exactly. The empire relies on the illusion of moral authority to govern. When the world and the empire's own citizens watches heavily armed soldiers beating unarmed people who refuse to raise a hand in defense, the brutality of the regime is exposed. You strip away their legitimacy.
But the discipline required for that is staggering. I mean, human nature just screams at you to fight back.
Oh, completely. And Gandhi was incredibly uncompromising about that discipline. There's a pivotal moment that illustrates this perfectly. The non-cooperation movement was gathering massive, unprecedented momentum across the country. But then, in 1922, a violent incident occurred in Charichara.
Right, the police station.
Yeah, a local mob clashed with the police and set a police station on fire, killing several officers.
Which is a tragedy, obviously, but in the context of a nationwide revolution, some might argue it was just a localized skirmish. So what did Gandhi do?
She unilaterally pulled the plug on the entire nationwide movement.
He just stopped the revolution while they were winning.
He did. He completely withdrew it, and it deeply frustrated many of his closest allies. But, it proved his unyielding commitment to his rules. He understood that if the movement became violent, it lost the moral high ground instantly.
It just becomes another riot.
It's exactly a riot which the British could easily justify crushing with military force. By stopping it, he proved that ahimsa wasn't just a convenient tactic for when you lack weapons. It was an absolute, unbreakable law. It wasn't about physical force, it was about shifting the moral high ground.
That context makes his later, most famous movements make so much more sense. Like the Dundee March in 1930. He leaves his Sabarmati ashram and walks for 24 days to the coast simply to break the salt law.
Pure, highly communicable symbolism.
It's a masterclass in civil disobedience. And it escalates all the way to the 1942 Quit India movement, where he issues the ultimate do or die slogan. which, of course, led to him and the leadership being imprisoned in the Aga Khan Palace.
He was entirely consistent. The psychological mechanism was always the same. He was an unmovable object.
So what does this all mean? How does the world react to an unmovable object? Because his methods were so radical, so entirely unprecedented, people literally didn't know how to categorize him.
They really didn't.
If you look at the historical records, the astonishing variety of nicknames bestowed upon him is practically a psychological study of the 20th century. I am just marveling at the paradox of these nicknames.
It's a wild list.
Okay, listen to this. Rabindranath Tagore, the great poet, calls him Mahatma, meaning great soul, and Gandhi, in return, respectfully calls Tagore Guruji.
Mutual profound respect.
Right. Then the first president of India, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, calls him the Ajatshatru of the modern era, meaning one who has no enemies. Lord Mountbatten, representing the British Crown, calls him a one-man boundary force.
And those are just the people trying to praise or, understand it.
Exactly. Then you have Winston Churchill, who derisively calls him a half-naked fakir. Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya affectionately calls him the king of beggars. Tribal communities refer to him as Malang Baba.
The list just goes on.
It really does. His early associates in South Africa called him Bangishiramani and Karamveer. An English magistrate in South Africa dismissed him completely as a coolie barrister. During World War I, she was even labeled a recruiting sergeant because of his stance at the time. And finally, Subhas Chandra Bose uses Singapore radio in 1944 to broadcast the title that stuck globally, the Father of the Nation.
It's quite the spectrum.
It's insane. How can one single human being be simultaneously seen as the king of beggars to one ally, an Ajatshatru, one with no enemies, to another, and a coolie barrister to an opponent?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, I think we have to synthesize these contradictions. We have to realize that this diverse list of monikers tells us less about Gandhi himself and much more about the people looking at him.
Oh, that is an interesting pivot. Say more about that.
Think about his core framework. The rules he established for his life and for the Sabarmati ashram were incredibly strict. He demanded adherence to truth, nonviolence, celibacy, non-stealing, and swadeshi, which is the use of indigenous goods.
Very rigid principles.
Extremely. He was deeply influenced by the stark moral literature of Leo Tolstoy. He authored foundational texts like Hein Swaraj and My Experiments with Truth, and he tirelessly edited papers like Young India and Harijan. He was a man made entirely of unbending principles.
He didn't mold himself to fit the room. Like we said, he was a fixed point.
Yes, and because he was this single, unwavering pillar of philosophy, he acted like a mirror.
A mirror. Wow, I love that.
Yeah, so when Winston Churchill looked at Gandhi and saw a half-naked fakir, it was reflecting Churchill's own imperial insecurities. Churchill couldn't compute a form of power that didn't wear a military uniform or project imperial wealth.
That makes total sense.
Right. And when Mountbatten saw a one-man boundary force, it reflected the British establishment's sheer awe at a man whose raw influence could achieve what their entire armed forces could not. A single unwavering philosophy of absolute truth acts as a mirror, reflecting the insecurities, the biases, or the admirations of whoever's standing in front of it.
That is profound. He was whatever their conscience needed him to be. But of course, maintaining that kind of absolute, uncompromising stance makes you a target in a polarized world.
Unfortunately, yes.
His journey ends violently. He is assassinated on January 30th, 1948, by Nathuram Godse while he was simply heading to prayer at Bila Mandir. His final words, "Hey Ram," are permanently etched at his memorial, Rajghat. A staggeringly violent end for the global architect of nonviolence.
He is a tragic irony. But it cemented his philosophy into the bedrock of the newly independent nation, a nation that had finally won its freedom, largely due to his relentless push.
But the story of October 2nd doesn't end with Gandhi's death in 1948, because while Gandhi was the visionary architect who drew the impossible blueprints, the nation desperately needed structural engineers to actually build the house.
Right, the transition of power.
Exactly. And this bridges us to the second historical figure we're looking at, who was born on that exact same day, Lal Bahadur Shastri.
The quiet successor. The transition from the agitator to the administrator.
Born in Mughal Sarai on October 2nd, 1904, decades after Gandhi. And his background is notably ordinary compared to some of the other titans of state. His parents were Munshi Sharda Prasad Srivastava and Ram Dulari. He wasn't born into massive wealth or political royalty.
No, he really came up through the grassroots.
But if you look at his timeline, he is right there in the trenches with Gandhi's movements. He was a deeply active participant. He was there in 1921 for non-cooperation, in 1930 for Dandi, and in 1942 for Quit India.
He was entirely molded by the very mechanisms of Satyagraha we were just analyzing.
But his role was fundamentally different. I look at it this way. He was like the indispensable quiet architect, or the understudy who suddenly has to step into the lead role on stage, immediately following a legendary larger-than-life performance.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
The visionary points to the horizon and says, we are going there. But the engineer has to figure out how to build the bridge so the whole thing doesn't collapse.
Exactly, which is exactly what Shastri had to navigate. He rises through the ranks, becoming the General Secretary of the Congress in 1951, and then is suddenly called to the highest office. Following the death of India's first prime minister, the towering figure of Jawaharlal Nehru, Shastri steps in to become India's second prime minister on June 9th, 1964.
And, this raises an important question. I want the listener to consider what it takes to govern a newly free nation versus fighting to free it.
It's a completely different skill set.
It really is. It is one thing to unite a population against a common enemy. It is a completely different challenge to stabilize a massive, fragile democracy facing existential threats from every direction once that enemy leaves.
And the challenges he faced during his tenure were staggering. You have a country trying to find its footing after centuries of colonial extraction. He was dealing with severe food crises, massive external pressures, border conflicts. The sheer administrative endurance required to hold the country together during that window is just mind-boggling.
Gandhi's role was to dismantle an empire using moral force. Shastri's role was to utilize pragmatic, quiet endurance to keep the resulting nation from shattering.
And his time in office was tragically short. He faced a deeply challenging tenure before his sudden, mysterious death on January 11th, 1966.
Leaving a huge void.
Right. He was succeeded temporarily by Gulzarilal Nanda, and today his quiet steadfastness is memorialized at Vijay Ghat by the Yamuna River.
It creates a really fascinating contrast between our two figures. You have Gandhi's highly public martyrdom, showing one face of leadership, and then you have Shastri's quiet, mysterious end while wrestling with the overwhelming logistics of statecraft. Two entirely different faces of leadership, both absolutely necessary for a nation's survival, born on the exact same day.
When you step back and look at the incredible synchronicity of October 2nd, it's staggering.
It really is.
We've journeyed from a 13-year-old groom in Porbandar who gets thrust into the pressure cooker of South Africa, invents a psychological martial art, and becomes a global symbol of nonviolence. And right alongside him, born on that same day, is a quiet participant in those very marches who rises to become the second prime minister of a free India.
Holding the fragile architecture of the country together during its most perilous early days.
So how do we bring this massive, sweeping history down into our daily lives? You listening right now, you probably aren't trying to dismantle a global empire.
Probably not.
And you probably aren't trying to manage a national food crisis or run a newly formed democracy. But whether you are trying to lead millions or honestly just trying to manage the chaos of your own life and schedule, there is a fundamental takeaway here.
Having a core set of unshakable principles provides a vital anchor.
Totally.
Whether it's Gandhi's strict ashram rules of truth and self-reliance, or Shastri's quiet, enduring steadfastness. When the pressure mounts, if your foundation is solid, the chaos around you becomes manageable.
You dictate the terms of your own reaction. And that brings me back to where we started. We talked about how Gandhi utilized Satyagraha, the relentless disciplined pursuit of truth, against an external physical empire.
Right.
But I want to leave you with a thought for your own life today. In our modern world, our biggest battles are rarely against an occupying army. Our battles are often internal.
Absolutely.
We are constantly battling the quiet warfare of digital distraction. We are battling deep engineered polarization. We are suffocating under a constant wave of information overload designed to make us react rather than think. So as you go about your day, think about this. What would a modern personal satyagraha look like for you today?